guys, welcome back to my channel, Wine About Books, where we talk about our favorite morally gray men and all the red flags we love to ignore. Before we go any further, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And with that, let's get into today's episode. So, as promised, I have my husband here to talk about Dune. And he's coming over from the American Blues podcast, which is his own channel. And before we dive into Dune, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Lee. Like Molly said, I usually have my own little podcast where I rant about Chelsea games every week. And we are terrible right now, so it's quite entertaining seeing me lose my sanity little by a little bit throughout the season. But it helps me out, and Molly doesn't have to listen to me rant about it anymore. So it's great. But thank you for having me here.
He doesn't normally join me on this channel because, romance books are not really his thing, except for maybe a few spicy scenes here and there. But he is the one who got me obsessed with Dune, and he himself is obsessed with Dune. And so he kind of wanted to join me for this little non-spoiler / spoiler review. And so before we get into the spoiler version of it, I'll just tell you a little bit about kind of like we usually do, just go into like a non-spoiler explanation of the book, tell you why you should read it. And I can tell you, I went into the movies completely blind, having not read this book. In fact, this one over here dragged me. And I mean dragged, because I am not a sci-fi fan. As I have mentioned before, I was just like, I do not want to see these movies. This is not my thing. And even after seeing the first one, I was still kind of And then we saw the second one, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this book. This story is incredible. But that being said, if you go into the movies blind, you are going to be very, very confused.
Yeah, I would say the movies, at least the first one, it does a good job at trying to explain the complexities of the book, which there is a lot. And kind of like the book, you just get thrown into this world. And if you don't have very much background or explanation of the different characters, the universe, how the different families and houses are related to each other, it's quite difficult to get into it. The movie, like I said, does a good job, but what the book devotes several pages, chapters to setting up, the movie might have just one line. And if you miss that line, or if you don't pay attention and really think about it, it's very easy to get lost. And once you get lost in Dune, you just have no idea what's going on anymore. And once you lose that motivation, it is hard to get through the rest of it. But like I said, if you have the patience to get through it, I think it's amazing. The movies are amazing. And I think the book is absolutely incredible. I'm a big fan of sci-fi. I haven't read all the big sci-fi books, but before the first movie came out, I told myself I probably owe it to just get through the book, since it is supposed to be one of the best sci-fi books ever written. And pretty much right after I started it, I said, yeah, I completely understand why this world is incredible. What he did in terms of universe building in just one book is, I think near unparalleled, even in the sci-fi universe.
Yeah, as someone who is a big romance reader, I do read a little bit of everything. So, I don't limit myself. And like I said, I'm not a sci-fi person, but as a romance person, this book, I flew through it. This book was incredible. And you read it before the movie.
I did. Yeah, before the movie. And I was quite lost through about half of the book because, a book just throws you in.
Straight in.
Yeah, there's no explanation of who these characters are, what this world is made of. You just get thrown in, and the book has like confusing parts at the beginning of every chapter. It's like an excerpt from a future encyclopedia reference of the events. And yeah, you just get thrown into it. You have no idea what's going on, but I think sometimes that's the best way to get into such like a deep and heavy story.
Yeah, I think today there's too many books that have too much explanation, too much hand holding. And for me, part of the fun is reading through a book and kind of piecing it together, which is really what Dune is about. Before we go a little further into it, for all you romance lovers, it's not a romance book. I would not classify it as a romance book. There is some romance in it. There is a little bit of some spicy scenes, but you kind of have to imagine them. They're very fade to black, and there is romance. It's not, I wouldn't classify it as a romance.
Yeah. And I think overall, if you want a quick non-spoiler version of the story, it's just about one kid's rise to power, but he's basically an anti-hero. I see him more as a tragic hero because he has the ability to see certain parts of the future. he doesn't know if they're going to come true or not, but he has that ability. And there's a lot of details into why he has that ability, who set him up with that. But honestly, that's all spoiler territory.
Yeah, there's not much to say other than the main character is Paul Atreides, and you're basically following his journey. You're following his journey, his rise to, like you said, this anti-hero type charismatic leader, which is a big theme in the book, of which we'll get into a little bit more. But one of the big themes is to be wary of all these charismatic leaders. But yeah, check it out. It's a great political drama. So lots of different characters. Like I said, there's not a lot of explanation. You just kind of have to power through it. But as someone who loves romance, I was able to plow through it. It's incredible.
Yeah, and one thing is a lot of sci-fi is around like humans versus robots or humans against aliens, and it kind of sets the story in those big themes. But this one is very interesting in that it actually, the whole story happens after humans and machines have already had their war. Machines lost, humans won. And I think that's what makes it more relatable, and you can really take the themes of the book and apply it to just about any part of history, even today, and see parallels of it. And it ultimately ends up being a very human story. And I think that's why Molly was able to like it more than a lot of other sci-fi stories. And I think that's why it's so iconic in sci-fi world, and why so many other iconic stories such as like Star Wars, even Matrix, you can very clearly see the influences that this book had on those stories, where Star Wars essentially is just a retelling into a more popcorn friendly form. Yeah.
And that's interesting because I don't like Star Wars. I know I'm offending a bunch of people out there right now, but I do not enjoy Star Wars, and I loved this book. I would even argue that a lot of the themes in this book could be relevant to really any time period. Like, it's relevant now. It was relevant when it was written back in the 60s. So it's so relatable. And if you know anything about me, I'm the type of person that I need some footing in reality. Like, I can read fantasy, sci-fi, but I need some footing in reality, and I need AI to not be in charge, because I can't stand robots. Robots freak me out. Give me a horror movie all day long, but if you want to give me something like iRobot, I will like hide under the covers. I can't do it. So yeah, you know what it kind of makes me think of? The Matrix is almost like, he's like, oh, what if the machines did win? We're going to do a version of that.
You talking about Dune or?
No, I'm talking about like the writer of the Matrix probably thought Dune, because
Oh, yeah.
Matrix is like, oh, what if the machines won?
Yeah, exactly.
Versus, anyway, that's a random topic. But yeah, non-spoiler review, go read it. Even if you're not a sci-fi fan, give it a chance. Or listen to the audiobook if you have a short attention span, because that's what he did. He listened to the audiobook, and it might be easier for you to keep your attention. But yeah, check it out. Go read it. If you don't want to read it, at least go watch the movies, because they are incredible.
Yeah. But now to the spoiler version, which, like we said, the movies are incredible, but there are some major differences between the movie and the book. And we kind of just wanted to talk through them and see how we felt. For those of you that know the story, this is for you. Mm-hmm. But let's start with the biggest change, which is Chani.
I would argue Chani is definitely one of the biggest changes.
Yeah. How'd you feel?
I actually like the changes they made with her. I think it was more relevant to the time today, because I think women today can relate a little more to a woman being skeptical and standing up for herself and not just going along with whatever he says or he wants. I do understand why Herbert wrote the book the way he did, like why he made Chani so agreeable. And when you read the book, if you haven't read the book, but if you've seen the movies, in the book, there's a huge time jump. And the movie only goes, like a few months, 9 months, maybe? Not even?
Maybe not even. I kind of think it's hinted that Leah maybe grows faster in the womb. Mm-hmm. So, but the movie doesn't really get into that. So the assumption is somewhere between probably like 5 to 8 months, something like that.
Yeah, because in the book, there's a lot more time that passes, and obviously they have a child together. So to me, it makes sense in the book setting why she would be slightly more agreeable. But I do think they made Denis Villeneuve made the right choice to make Chani a little more apprehensive. And it also plays into the big theme of this book. That's what I felt about it.
I think it made sense. I think Denis Villeneuve really understood the message of the book, mm-hmm. which I think just from what I've seen in interviews and such, it seems like, after the original book came out, Frank Herbert wasn't really happy with how people viewed Paul. Everybody saw him as this like great heroic person and they loved his character. And he was like, no, this book is supposed to be a warning. And so that's why he wrote Dune Messiah, to kind of take down his character. And I think Chani does a really good job in the movie to represent that skepticism that Herbert really wanted people to have of Paul and for people like Paul. And then another thing that I like the change is Chani kind of represents a whole sect of the Fremen that's not fundamental or not fundamentalists. And I think that makes sense. You know, there's supposed to be millions of Fremen. It's kind of unrealistic for every single one of them to believe the same story in the same way. So it does make sense that some of them are very fervent believers and other ones, they're not so much. And they're probably like, we want to control our own future.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's like she kind of represents, like you said, the ones who aren't the fundamentalist, and the rest of them. I think what he was trying to get across is when there's an oppressed people, they latch on to anything to hope for, anything to give them hope, and you have to be wary of,
you know, someone who rises to give you that hope.
Yeah, like prophets, or especially because in this book, obviously, you know, the Bene Gesserit created this entire prophecy, prophecy. And Paul knows that, but he knows he has no choice. And Chani, she doesn't believe in the prophecy, really.
Not in the movie.
Not in the movie. She kind of does in the book, but in the movie, like, so she doesn't quite understand why he's playing into this so much. I mean, it's really only after he drinks the water of life in the movie that his mind kind of shifts.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I'm curious to see how Villeneuve is going to do Dune Messiah, given how this movie ended with Chani kind of riding off on the worm and her being extremely angry. But even though there was a scene where Paul said, oh, she'll understand. I've seen the future, which, he's correct. But I think that does make the next part, the conflict between Paul, Chani, and Princess Irulan, a lot more interesting than if Chani was just standing in the background going, oh, yeah, I agree with this.
This is fine.
Yeah, this is totally fine, but it's not fine, but I'm really fine with it, So I do think that that's a very interesting direction that they could take the next movie in, because inherently the next story, it just isn't as, bombastic and as this one. There aren't as many big war scenes that are in the book, but it'd be interesting if they showed more of the Holy War, actually.
I would actually love to see more of the Holy War.
Yeah, if they really fleshed that out, I think that would have more impact, because then you really get to see the effect of Paul's leadership.
Yeah, and kind of going into the theme, I think it helps bring to light, like, I personally find there's a theme of feminism in the book, which you wouldn't think by how she goes along with it, and we'll get into it a little bit more when we talk about the Bene Gesserit. It's really more about the Bene, how women
I think
are
it's
in power.
about I think another big theme in the book is how the Bene Gesserit, while they might not seem like it, they are ultimately the people driving the whole universe. They work in the background. They're extremely powerful. They can essentially make anybody do anything that they want, but they hide that power in the shadows while they scheme.
Yeah.
And control everybody. And I think that's a really interesting and very profound message.
Oh, yeah.
That he wrote about. Yeah. And I think the book ends, even though the book, Chani, is a lot more passive than the movie version. I think the book ends on a very interesting note with Lady Jessica telling Chani that, history will remember us as the wives.
Right. And that's how it ends. And, I've said before in other videos that, like, I love the ending to a book, but the ending to a book can make or break it for me. Whereas you're the type who will read the ending of a book when you start a book, which I don't get. You will read the last page, which I always found, like, it's so weird.
About halfway through, I'm like, I'm just curious how it ends. I just want to see if these characters are still alive, if I'll even understand the ending. And sometimes I'm like, oh, okay. Other times I'm like, I have no idea what I just read, and it doesn't even matter. And I just keep going.
No, for me, it makes or break. It doesn't matter how good the book is. If the ending is shit, like, it makes or break a book for me. And I feel like the ending is so powerful. And again, what Lady Jessica says to Chani about, like, history will remember us as the wives, I just think is such a powerful message. Especially when you think of the time he wrote it in, the 60s. Like, yeah. I think it's so ahead of its time for what he was trying to say. And speaking of the themes of being a charismatic leader, you think about the time he's in. He's talking, they're fresh off World War II. They're going into a Cold War, and he's trying to make you aware of these leaders when you're looking for anything to grasp onto, any type of hope. So I think as relevant as it was for then, I think it's just as relevant now. And I think the changes they made in the movie to adapt to the times worked perfectly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. All right, another big change. This one I don't remember as much since I read the book a few years ago, but Lady Jessica is a little bit different in the movie compared to the book. I think since you just read the book, that's a little bit fresher on your mind.
She's a little more like her and Paul are not like as close as they are in the movie. Like Paul even says that it's towards the end of the book, especially after she has become the Reverend Mother. He says, or in his thoughts, he's like, my mother is my worst enemy, and she doesn't even know it, because she has the Bene Gesserit's end goal in mind, and that is ultimately her goal, no matter what it takes. And Paul is caught in this position of he doesn't want this burden on him, and his mother has placed this burden on him, and now he's in a position where he has no choice, and he has to just accept it. And so there's a lot of tension and animosity between them.
It's a very healthy mother-son relationship.
Yeah, totally. So good when, your end goal is...
Yeah, I thought the movie did a good job, though, showing how if you just watch Dune 1 and 2 back to back, you'll see at the end of Dune 1, all she wants to do is get off the planet. She wants to go back to Caladan, their home planet. And then pretty much in the beginning of Dune 2, she drinks the water, or is basically forced into it. And she does it, and she becomes a Reverend Mother, and she immediately changes her mind. She's like, nope, we got to convert everyone. We got to make Paul the Lisan al-Gaib, no matter what.
Yeah, and that's really when their relationship shifts, and he hates it, but he knows he has, especially after he drinks the water, he knows there's no choice. It's going to happen whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
And so he just takes it. So yeah, that's real. I mean, other than the beginning, where it is more of a typical mother-son relationship, even though she's very clearly training him to try to become this prophet, and training him in the Bene Gesserit ways. Yeah, it's a very complicated relationship. And I think they portrayed that in the movie, but it's definitely a lot more complicated in the book.
And another big change is, of course, Paul and Shani's first son, Leto the First, which was not even in the movie at all. And I think looking back, they changed the motivation for why Paul ultimately went south to agree to drink the water. They changed it from Leto dying or their son Leto dying, to their siege tablet being attacked. And I think movie-wise, I think it makes sense. Giving a 2-year time jump would just have slowed that pace to an absolute crawl. And the second movie really needed to just keep going until the end. And ultimately, change that motivation didn't change the story much at all. Like, you still felt it in the movie, why he decided, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to do this. I can't really escape my fate anymore. And I think just adding another character, another child actor too, that you have to spend time with to actually care about in order for that death to have meaning, that would have been too much for this movie. And it was already, 2.5 hours?
It's almost 3.
It's almost 3. Like, I'm fine with, 3, 4, 5 hour movies. I would say 99.9% of people are not.
This is not a Jack Snyder movie.
Yeah, this is not
Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder. Yeah, this is not his.
It's not Zack Snyder.
Snyder cut. So, yeah, I agree with that change. I'm completely fine with it.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who didn't read the book until after the movie, that was seamless to me. Like, to me, that motivation made perfect sense. There was nothing about it I was like, that seems a little weird. Like, to me, it made perfect sense. It wasn't until I read the book that I even knew they had a son, and that was the motivation.
Yeah. And then the other big child change, which is humongous, is Paul's sister, Aaliyah, where in the book she's born. She's preborn. I don't know if that's the right term.
She's like preborn in the womb when she drinks the water.
Yeah, exactly. And she's the one that ultimately kills the Baron with the Gom Jabbar. But I think it made sense with how the movie did it, even though it was a little bit weird seeing a talking fetus. I think they did the best they could to try to portray what happens to Leah after Jessica drinks the water, which is that she gets all the powers that her mom has. She gets all the memories of all the previous Reverend Mothers all at once in the womb, which is why they considered this an abomination in the book and something that they would never have allowed, because the idea is that if the person isn't ready to take on that power and they don't have enough will or personality, then they could easily be taken over by any of the previous personalities. And the movie tried to explain that a little bit, although that's clearly way better explained in the book.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but it would have been really strange to see a child pop out, grow up super quick, and have a fully adult-minded 2-year-old walking around the movie. That's just, yeah, it would have been Twilight all over again, and nobody wants that.
That's Twilight CGI baby all over again, and nobody needs that kind of nightmare fuel.
No, and I think at the end of the movie, giving Paul the chance to kill the Baron was also very satisfying, much more so than a baby popping out and baby murdering adults. Yeah, that's just strange.
It was more meaningful to see Paul. But you also see, like, in the movie, like, in the book, it does a good job of having Paul realize he just has to accept this. Where in the movie, I feel like he drinks the water, and, like, I even leaned over to you in the theater, and I was like, he's going nuts. Like, he's just completely losing it at this point. Like, he just is like, fuck it all. I'm just going to do this.
The way I saw it was he's way more assured, and he knows exactly what he needs to say to make the vision that he sees come true, because he can see all these different futures and he knows exactly what he needs to say and how to act in front of people. But yeah, it was obviously a big change in the movie, and it's one of my favorite scenes when after he drinks the water and he goes to that council meeting with the Fremen.
Yeah.
And he's just a completely different person. He's 100% aware of himself. He's sure of himself. He challenges all the Fremen and basically, tells them, I'm your Lizang Al-Gaib. I'm going to lead you to paradise. I love it. Absolutely.
I mean, I think it was very effective, and, like, especially in that, it wasn't until, like, that moment when he said, I'm going to lead you, or no, it's a scene where he holds up his knife. He's like, I am Paul Atreides, or
Duke of Atreides.
Yeah, that
Duke of Atreides.
It gave
Arrakis.
me of Arrakis. Yeah, it gave me, like, to me, like, there is so much religious undertone to it, and that scene was just like very prophetic. I don't know. It was very interesting. Like, I've told you this. Like, to me, it's almost as like he took the New Testament and the Quran and kind of like did his own interpretation of everything and how it goes. And yeah, it's just the whole religious undertones to it, and just how somebody can let that power get to their head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that scene also because, if you rewatch it, he speaks. I forgot the name of the Fremen language, but there's a name for it. But he speaks Fremen most of the time, and then he stops and he switches to his native tongue, and he pulls out his ring that he's put away, and you kind of see Gurney's view where he's like, oh, he's still Paul. He still remembers, his ultimate purpose. So I love everything about that scene and after.
That scene is very powerful, and it's such a character, like, you can see his character arc from the beginning of the first movie, even the book, where he's like this kind of meek, docile, very quiet boy, and he kind of just turns into this leader, of these millions of people. Yeah. And so it's an interesting, change to see how he's grown as a character. And I always thought he got more buff for this movie, but
I think his suit got more buff.
Yeah, I think his suit just got more buff. Speaking of that, side note, as a romance lover, the first movie and the second movie has a lot of nice eye candy. If you are curious, there's Josh Brolin. There is Jason Momoa in the first movie. You have Oscar Isaac, which is, and if you're a Timothée Chalamet fan.
Yeah, if you like very pretty, skinny guys, then I would say he's definitely up there at the top.
Yeah, segueing with that, there's also Austin Butler, who plays Theta Ralpha, who they also fleshed out a lot more in the movie than in the book.
Yeah. Theta Ralpha in the book, I barely remembered him as a character because it just seemed like, the most of the story is about the Baron and Raban, and then Raban just kind of disappears and Theta Ralpha comes out of nowhere, and then he shows up just to get murdered by Paul at the end. I was like, okay, you're kind of just like a plot device in the books, but I liked the movie version. I like Austin Butler as an actor. I think you do too, a little too much. But yeah, he did an incredible job. The scene on Giddy Prime where they filmed with the infrared camera was amazing.
It was so cool. So Gladiator-esque.
Yeah, and just to see just how unhinged and insane he is, I think they did a really good job.
I like how they picked him to potentially give them another potential prophet too. because they
Yeah,
didn't think Paul was going to work.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, the movie did flesh out just how much the Bene Gesserit plan and scheme in the background. And that was another change from the movie to the book, where in the book, the motivation to go against Atreides came from the Emperor himself because he was becoming very jealous with how much power the Atreides were having. And so that's why he started off the war between them and the Harkonnens. But in the movie, there's a scene where Princess Erlon approaches Gaius Mahayim and she's like, you guys did this. You told the Emperor to attack House Atreides, didn't you? And she was like, of course we did. They were getting too powerful and we couldn't control them.
Yeah, and they didn't, like obviously, the Bene Gesserit are only supposed to have females, and the fact that she gave Duke Leto a boy, which, side note, it goes to show like she was set up with him to try to produce an heir or produce this prophet, and she actually fell in love with him. So she gave him what he wanted, which was a son.
Yeah. And I don't know if the books ever get into it or the later books, but I feel like she definitely thought that she could be the one to produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
Oh, she definitely, no, in the book, it's very clear that she thinks, especially when she becomes the Reverend Mother, she's like, you're the Kwisatz Haderach. Yeah. She's like, no doubt, this is who you are, this is who you were meant to be, this is who you were born to be.
Yeah.
Like, she has no doubt. And Paul is just, I don't want this. And she's like, well, you have no choice.
Yeah.
Like, this is who you are. They believe this is who you are.
He's very much, I don't want it until, I kind of want it and I really want it.
Until he drinks the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. And then another change in the end is there's no mention of the Spacing Guild. So the movie ends with the other houses rejecting Paul as the new emperor. So they go, that's how the Holy War starts, which I fucking love this ending.
The ending is so amazing. Just the music itself. If you're a Hans Zimmer fan, I think it's some of his best work since Gladiator. I would argue that Gladiator used to be my favorite. This one's probably now my new favorite by him.
Oh yeah, I listen to that soundtrack when I drive all the time.
Oh yeah,
it pumps me
too.
up.
I play it for our daughter, and she will sit there and just like bob her head to it, like it's hard metal or something.
So I like the end. I think with the movie, since there's barely any mention of the Spacing Guild, which in the book, the Spacing Guild is huge. They basically run the universe. There's the Emperor, there's the great houses, but they all answer to the Spacing Guild because that's their bank, and that's who helps them with interstellar travel. And without them, they would have nothing. And the Spacing Guild is 100% dependent on the spice that Arrakis has. So in the book, at the end, when Paul threatens to destroy all the spice fields, they step in. They're like, no, let's not do that. We'll just call it a peace. But I did think that the movie, it would be really strange for the Spacing Guild to have been there at the very beginning of Dune 1 and then not show up for nearly 5 hours and then just show up at the very end. It wouldn't have made as much sense.
No. And I don't think the movie itself needed it. I feel like it would have been a little bit redundant because, it was already very clear that, the Emperor and the Harkonnens really had a monopoly on spice. It was their only form of space travel. And quick side note, if you're listening just for fun and you haven't read or watched the movie, when we talk about spice, it's not the spice you're thinking of. It's just saying, they gotta know. You are on a romance channel. There is spice, but like this is a spice that's like, it's almost like their fuel. Like it's what fuels everything.
Yeah, it's what allows everything. And so in the book, because what's interesting about Dune, like I said in the beginning, is that the humans versus machine war already happened. And humans won. They decided they could never be slaves to machines again or never use machines. So the only way they could successfully interstellar travel is to basically get super high on spice, which gives them a brief moment of like premonition to allow them to travel between the stars. And so the way they travel is with these Spacing Guild masters who are just permanently encased in a vat of spice and they're permanently high and they help them travel. And that's what they are.
You think Frank Herbert was also trying to warn us about machines?
Maybe. Maybe.
I'm just saying we have The Matrix and Terminator and I'm just saying, yeah, Dune, yeah.
But like I said, I think the movie did a good job. I think the movie is fantastic. All the changes I think made sense.
Oh yeah.
But it's still well worth a read, especially
Absolutely.
with how rich the story is. If you just watch the movie, it's so hard to understand the intricacies of the characters and all the backgrounds. Yeah, so book is great, movie's great. I think they're both necessary to enjoy the series.
Well, it's like any movie adaptation. As good as it is, it's never going to compare to the experience of reading the book. You're always going to get more out of the book, you know. Us as millennials who grew up on Harry Potter, you could argue all day long that series is amazing, but it will never compare to reading those books.
Yeah, man. I've talked to people who have only seen the movies. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, you got to go read the books.
But this is the same thing. It's the same way as like these movies are incredible. So I would argue go read the book. It's an experience is how I would say. Like the book is an experience.
Yeah. And then do you want to talk about the 1984 Dune?
Yeah, so they made this. Wait, they made it like they tried to condense it all into one movie, didn't they?
Yeah, one less than 2 hour
How did you
movie.
do that?
It's amazing with Sting as Fader Alpha, where he's mostly naked throughout the movie. You have this 35-year-old looking dude playing Paul, who's supposed to be a teenager. Incredible. There's the terrible CGI of the shields. So they're supposed to have these shields, which I think the new movie did a really good job. But the 1984 version, they just didn't have the CGI technology then. So when they put on the shields, it looks like they're encased in these blocky jello.
Globs of jello. And it's just like, it's so comical. And like, bless their heart. Like, I think they tried so hard for 1984. I think they worked with what they had. And like, the director clearly wanted to do his best. Like, he was trying so hard to like give Dune fans, you know, the movie they've always wanted, but you know,
But he also said he never read the book before. He just
which is very clear.
Did it himself, you know. So he gave the Baron a bunch of boils on his face, which weird.
Why?
That's fine. I think two of my favorite scenes, which I think a lot of people know, is the Gom Jabbar scene on the old one, and then the final silence. The Gom Jabbar scene in the beginning. You know, the whole point is Paul is supposed to show that he has control. But in that movie, the only way he could show how much pain he was in was to yell, "The pain!"
Yeah, because they couldn't do the voice. So it's just, "The pain!" Or "Silence!"
Yeah, and at the end where Paul finally tells Geis Mahim off with his voice, which is supposed to be a big moment, but in that movie, it's just, "Silence!" And then she just flies back.
How dare you use the voice on me? Oh my God, it's so good. It's like a hilariosity. It's so bad. It's good. But I could see people who grew up with it and grew up with Dune, and that was their first adaptation of it. Like, it's just a canon event of their childhood. You have a coworker who's like, that movie's amazing. I don't care what you say.
Yeah. They saw it. I think he said when he was like 7 or 8 years old, absolutely loved it. I can't imagine watching a movie like that when you're 7 or 8. But yeah, obviously it was imprinted in his brain and he loves it and he still loves it to this day. So good for him.
It's definitely more of an not actual, but it's more of a true adaptation where Chani's her la la la, this is fine. Like, I will do this.
They have the Spacing Guild. They brought out a mutated person floating in a vat of green goo. They did it. It's like, this is why you shouldn't put this in here, but you did it.
I feel like if you are a true Dune fan, at some point you should watch it just to say you've seen it, and just like how you can watch the TV show Children of Dune or.
Yeah, there was a early 2000s TV miniseries on Sci-Fi that was where they combined Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, and it was with James McAvoy. And I think Dune fans, from what I've seen, really liked that one. They said it stayed very true to the books, and James McAvoy has always been great, so he did a fantastic job playing Leto.
He plays there Leto the Second. Yeah. I've actually heard people really like the Children of Dune. I don't know if I'd read the book anymore. I think I might stop after Messiah.
Yeah, things after then just get, I think, way deeper into sci-fi weirdness, you know, and yeah, I'm not going to really ruin it for anybody that doesn't know, but things get real weird.
But I've heard, like, in terms of the movie, like, obviously they've confirmed Dune Messiah. He's going to do the third one. And I think it's so interesting because I've seen so many critics and people very high up and very well respected in the movie world are calling it like one of those trilogies that is going to go up there with like the Dark Knight trilogy, Lord of the Rings, the first Star Wars trilogy, and what's another good trilogy? Godfather. Like, they're saying, like, and like, I agree with that. I've seen all those trilogies, and I agree. It's if they can nail Dune Messiah, I think it'll be right up there with some of the classics that you will always have to see.
I think it will be incredible. And I know you don't know Dune Messiah. I've read too much on the story to not know it, but I think if he's going to end it how I think he's going to end it, I think it's going to be such an incredible payoff and such an incredible end for Paul's character and his story.
You're going to read it though, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm for sure going to read it.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree with that. In fact, we pre-ordered the second movie just to own it because, you know, we're millennials and we need our actual physical copies.
Yeah. I like holding things.
I don't trust that digital media is going to be here forever. He has a PS5 and he still plays with digital, like not digital, like
the physical. Yeah, I want the discs. I want a disc. I don't want some company to just suddenly turn off a game and I don't have access to it anymore. I want them. If I pay for that game, it's mine. It's mine forever.
Yeah,
that's how I like it.
So, but yeah, and then the only thing I would talk about is like how influential this was into the sci-fi world. Like just how much stuff has come from then. Really, I think it was the catalyst for the whole sci-fi genre in general.
Yeah, it was this and then Foundation that came before it. Those were really, I think, the first two series that really fleshed out a whole universe of multiple planets, like political systems. No one else had really done that before. And I think to do that in just one book that's not even that long is just incredible.
It's pretty dense.
It's not that. How many pages is it?
It's almost 700.
Yeah, that's not too long. It's not bad. It's fine. You got it.
I mean, I read plenty of books that are like 700 pages long.
For 700 pages to
I don't know if you guys can, you probably can't really tell, but those words are tiny.
I would say, I think to build this incredible universe in just one book, what a fantastic job.
No, it did an incredible job.
And I totally understand why this is such an important book in sci-fi, why people say it's one of the best sci-fi books ever written. And some of my other favorites are Ender's Game, which I personally love.
I feel like I should read Ender's Game.
Yeah, I think the movie did an okay job. They actually picked really good actors for their roles, but I just think Ender's Game is such a harder story to make into a movie because so much of the book is just in Ender's head and he's talking to himself. And unless you try to portray that somehow, which is really hard, or you have voiceover, which is not very interesting, the book is, I think you just need to read that book.
Yeah, I could see that. And you could see like its influence in Star Wars. Like you have Baron reminds me of what Jabba the Hutt, the big fat thing.
Yeah, there's Jabba, but the idea of Paul being related to the Baron being like a big thing.
Oh, that's right.
That's very much like Luke and Darth Vader.
Yeah, then you have like Bene Gesserit, which you said are like kind of like the Jedi.
Kind of like the Jedi, yeah. They're in the background. They have all these powers, which is very similar to the Force powers. And then you have the Emperor, who's behind everything. Yeah, so many things. Yeah, you have the giant worms, which Star Wars literally just had a random worm for no reason as a reference to it.
I mean, now when I saw the worms in the first movie, I was like, you told me this came before Star Wars. I'm like, Star Wars copied this, and you were like, yeah, they did. And like you said, you can see little influences in it in like The Matrix, or really you could honestly tie its influence into so many sci-fi things now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with like, I even picture the scenery. Like so many sci-fi movies have like this barren desert scene, and I feel like it comes from this book.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I think it's definitely worth the read. And like I said, if you have a short attention span, it's hard for you to focus, listen to the audiobook. It's great to have on in the background. You do have to pay attention. It's not one that you can kind of just casually listen to, because if you miss one thing, you're confused, you're fucked.
Yeah, that's how I got through it the first time was, I used to do long drives, so I put it on and listened to it, and yeah, it's incredible. I recommend it for everybody, whether you like sci-fi or not. If you just want a good story, read the book and then watch the movie, which is such like a fantastic payoff to the book, but after you read the book.
Read the book. And like, if you were just a movie buff, like my husband over here, you'll appreciate the movies for what they are. They're beautifully shot. It's Denis Villeneuve who did Blade Runner 2049. Arrival, which, they're beautifully shot. I loved Arrival. Blade Runner 2049 was kind of boring.
It was really good.
It's kind of boring.
Really good.
But it was beautifully shot. So if you're a fan of just like good cinematography, direction, you'll love it just for that. I mean, Dune 1, the first movie is a little bleak, but the second one is so pretty. It's gorgeous.
It's great. We can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. And as a romance person, like I said, there's some romance in it. It actually plays a big role, I would argue, towards the end, like in the last third, the last half of the book. But don't go into it expecting that to be the primary thing, because it is most definitely not. And basically we could end with like Frank Herbert's message was, be wary of these charismatic leaders.
Yeah, which I think is a relevant message for any time. Yeah,
And
even today.
people apparently didn't get that, so it's why he wrote Dune Messiah.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone were like, oh, he's saving the Fremen. He's this great person. He was like, then you missed the point. So yeah, it's great. There's so many themes. There's so many more themes you could go into, but I think that's all we're going to go into for now. Like I said, we can't recommend it enough. You should definitely check it out. If you've read it, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Are you going to check it out now that we've talked about it? Are you going to watch the movies? Let us know in the comments down below if there's anything we left out that you have a theory or an opinion on. Let us know. And if you're at it and you're a big soccer fan, go check out the American Blues podcast, sit in his misery with him. And that's all we have for today, guys.
All right. Bye.
See you next time.